I went to Mexico and stayed twice for 6 months, with 6 months in between. This was in 1961 and 62. The second time was really remarkable in that I stayed with Bruce Conner, the artist Bruce Conner, and his wife Jean Sunstead, who was pregnant at that time with their son Robert. So I'm 22, and I barely knew them. I was down there in Mexico. I knock on their door in Mexico City and say, "Hi, do you think I could stay here for a while?" We were blessed with a visit from a curandero whose name was Don Isauro, Isauro Nava. There was a knock on the door. We're on the second or third floor, and there's a very diminutive Mazatec Indian man with a hand-woven bag over his shoulder, campesino clothing, who very softly and humbly says, "I hear there are some people here who would like to have a mushroom ceremony." We said, yes. And that was our first mushroom ceremony with Don Isauro Nava. Those present at this ceremony, which lasted all night, were myself, Bruce and Jean, a Mexican middle-class couple whose name I forget, and Timothy Leary, and Don Isauro Nava's helper, his nephew Bernardo. The helper would eat half a dose, whereas we all got the complete dose, and he would take care of us. You had to have somebody to take care of you. As a result, we went to Huautla de Jimenez in Oaxaca, which was made famous in some books, I think, by Gordon Wasson about mushrooms and mushroom ceremonies. Don Isauro Nava invited us there. It's in the Sierra Mazateca, which is quite steep, subtropical, the kind of things where dahlias are growing as a native plant. It's the kind of thing where you take a bigger bus and a smaller bus, and then the rattletrap bus with everyone carrying chickens, and then you get out and walk from there. We got there about dusk. So he had a finca, a little coffee-growing outfit. The women all wore brightly embroidered, really psychedelic, huipiles. These were very nice people, very warm and receiving. They had a little kitchen outdoors. It was fresh psilocybe, probably cubensis. We watched them gathering them from some poop in the middle of the road. That's where they grew. Animal dung. And he'd look at us and size us up, and he'd put however many mushrooms in the bowl he thought we could handle. Don Isauro was very political. He had a shortwave radio. There was no electricity there. And he listened to radio stations all around the world. This is a guy that presents himself as a humble, uneducated person. He wasn't. He was brilliant. But he knew what was going on in the world in the course of the ceremony. He impersonated or became several different things, one of which was a Mexican, a mestizo Mexican, singing a typically sad and teary and boozy, sentimental Mexican song, perfectly became that mestizo Indian. And he also said, "Yo soy el águila mexicana." And we're in a little room, and you could hear the wings flapping and feel the breeze. And we just stood there with our heads bowed as he flew around the room. This is where you're melting into everything. So what happened with me, and as I've heard about other kinds of ceremonies with mind-altering plants, his aim was to take you as far into the death experience as he could without you actually dying, which I didn't know beforehand. I had to go out and use the bathroom, so Bernardo lifted me up by the arm and took me up outside and made sure I didn't fall down or something. During that time, it's completely dark. There was no moon. It was like new moon time. I felt that I had died. I was leaving my body. I lifted up out of my body, and I said, "Oh, wow, gee, I died so young. That's kind of a shame." And I went higher and higher up in the sky, and I thought, it's not that bad to have died here at this time. This is pretty cool. So I lifted out my arms and flew, and I was out there with the planets and stars and just happily humming along. And I kind of hear this little voice that says, "Come back, come back." And I go, "Oh, I guess it's time to come back in my body." So I gradually, drifted down there and settled back into the body. And I guess Bernardo lifted me up off the ground, or it was a 1,000-year journey in 10 minutes or something, And I had the realization of life and death. And that has stayed with me the rest of my life. And when I came back, it was still very dark, and not too far before dawn, Don Isauro, he had a simple Mexican candle holder with a little candle in it and a book of matches. He struck a match and lit the candle, and it looked like fireworks going off to us because we had been in the complete dark. And we just instinctively bowed down, and he was bowing and bowing before this flame and said, "Es la verdadera luz de Dios." It's truly the light of God.